By popular demand, today we're going to look at doing this. Alright, so we're going to look at how to do that jittery effect in After Effects using an After Effects expression. Some people are asking me if I did that directly in Stable Diffusion, and I think that would be really, really hard to do in Stable Diffusion. You might be able to do it using like deform keyframes or something, but it'd probably drive you insane trying to figure out how to actually like write out each keyframe like that. So we'll do it in After Effects. And I actually think it's nicer to be able to bring it into post and be able to edit the exact sequence and tweak parameters and that sort of thing. So I'll show you how to do that in After Effects using expressions. So here we are in After Effects. Again, I'm using After Effects. There's probably other ways to do this, but I like the scripting and expressions option within After Effects. So the way I made that video is actually 7 different layers of a Stable Diffusion video using image to image. So here you'll see I've got 2 layers here. So I've got Spider-Man, and then I've got Superman, or sorry, Spider-Man and Batman. So you'll see if we scrub through, we've got Spider-Man doing his thing, and then we've got Batman doing the exact same thing, just his own way. And I realized I've got my frames here wrong, so let me just do this real quick. 30.0, and this will be much longer. Cool. So this just uses expressions, and if you never use expressions, they're really awesome. It's pretty simple. It's like JavaScript with a little bit of difference here and there. So first off, let's just do a really random, just basic version where we like sort of randomly alternate between the 2 videos. So what we're going to do that is we're going to turn this off. We'll go back to just having 2 layers, having both of them on. And on the first layer, we're just going to click here until we get down to opacity. I believe, I forget what's the key command for it. T? Yeah, T. From here, you'll just option click onto the opacity stopwatch. And you'll see that from here is the expression. So the way we're going to do this, we're just going to apply a random variable. So let's just call r equals random. And then you provide random a value between any number. So let's say 0 and 100. So what this is going to do is every time we get a new frame, it's going to recalculate this. So we're going to generate a new random. Now what I want to do here is if I just were to leave this as is, nothing would change because I haven't output the value. The weird thing about expressions for me, if I'm used to like JavaScript or whatever, is the only way to output the value at the end is to be the last value or the last number associated with it. So if I put here 0.0 and then I click away, you'll see that this opacity is now always set to 0, right? So I don't see any of my Spider-Man video. So the way to fix that, or the way to change this if we want to use random alternations, is to do something like let's say r is, or let's say r is less than 50.0, and we'll do a ternary operator, and we'll say if it's less than 50, let's set it to 0. Otherwise, we'll set it to 100. So what exactly is this saying? So this is saying if our random value is less than 50, so every time this random value gets generated, if it's less than 50, let's set our opacity to 0, and if it's more than 50, let's set our opacity to 100. So if I click away from this, you'll see here now that I've got different values. So as I scrub through this at 0, 100, you can sort of watch here. 100, 0, 100, 100, 0, 0. So if this gets generated, it's going to randomly flicker between these values. So if I hit play, you'll see sometimes I get Spider-Man and sometimes I get Batman. Okay, so that's a really simple version, and we can actually use this exact same value, but you'll notice that in my video, over time, we get a little bit more, so it sort of starts as one video, and that slowly flickers more and more to the other value, or the other video. So let's talk about how to do that just next. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and duplicate this file, or this composition, and we'll open it up, and we'll go over here and hit T, and then we will open up our expression. So Again, remember that we want to make a almost linear translation. We still want to have a little bit of that jitter and a little bit of that randomness. So you could actually do almost like a linear. There's like a lerp inside of After Effects and expressions, and then you could add randomness to it. But I kind of like there's a better way for me to do this personally. So we're going to look at the time to frame. So TTF equals time to frames. So what this does, this value will convert our frame count into a number. So this, instead of getting the seconds, I'll actually get a frame count. So you could actually output this if I comment this out. Why doesn't that work? Okay. Comment that out. And I go TTF as our value. You'll see that frame 0 at 0, and then as you roll up, you'll see this value right here. The opacity changes as we go through each frame. So that's kind of cool because it actually gives you the blend mode, right? A little transparency. But that's not really what I want. What I actually want is to have it sort of jitter between time. So what we're going to do instead is we're still going to set a random value. So we'll still set between random and 100, and then we'll say, let's say random is greater than 100. You may be saying, well, it's never greater than 100 because it's always going to be under there, but just give me a second. So what we're going to do then is we're going to divide 100 by TTF, which is our time to frames, times some small value. This is where it gets a little bit less mathy and a little bit more, you just got to try some numbers. There's probably a way to actually figure out the exact calculation here, but from my experience, setting this to be something that's like less than 0.1 will generally give you the value. And actually, as you save this out, you can almost see what happens in our cache over here. So what we'll do is we'll remove that. And now you can sort of see that there are moments in here where this flickers up, right? So it flickers there, and then as it gets further along, we should see it flicker more often. So if just setting a random number and playing with it until it works is too vibey for you, we can look at how to debug this, or how to actually look at what this number represents. So let's take a look at how to do some debugging and expressions. So the easiest way for me, or the easiest way I found, is to add a text field to the frame. So now I've got our text field in here, and then you can twirl this down and you go to text, and then again option click onto source text. And what we will do is we'll just grab all of this code here, paste it in here, and I don't actually care about any value except this. So I just want to know at each time to my frame, what is this value, right? And we'll go in here and let's make our text a better color. Here, make it white. Okay, so at 0, because you can't divide by 0, right? Because 0 frames times whatever divided by 100 divided by 0 is going to be 0. It's going to be infinity, right? We can't really match this value. So at the first frame, this is never going to match, right? R, no matter what, is never going to be greater than infinity. Cool. Next frame. So at our next frame, it is 16,666, whatever. So again, R is never going to be bigger than that because our max on our random value here is 100. So you can kind of see, like, as this number gets smaller and smaller, we're still not at a place where we can actually max this out. So even 15 frames in, we can't get there. So at some point here, maybe, what is it? Frame 16, frame 17? Yeah, frame 16, we can start to do this. So if I make this value larger, or actually smaller, right? Let's make this a little bit smaller. You'll see this gets bigger and bigger. So this is kind of how you can learn, exactly what value you want to set this to. So let's set this to 0.02. And what we'll find then is that the first time we can really get Batman, sorry, remember this value is not the same as up here. If we set this to the same, we can do this here. That'll sort of give us a better sense of what we're actually looking at. So the first time we can actually see Batman would be at frame 203. And obviously, because we've set a random value here, it's going to randomly select between any number between 0 and 100, which means it's still very likely to or very unlikely to hit this number, right? It has to guess like 99 or 98 or higher in order to actually get to this place. So the smaller I make this value, the more likely the initial values are going to be more Spider-Man. Now you'll see now we've got much further in here that it is a little bit more likely to hit. And we'll also see now that as we get all the way to the end of this value, the lowest this could ever be is 7. So R is very likely going to be larger than 7 by the time we get across here. But you still get this little flickering, right? There are still moments where the random value is less than 8. And that means we get Spider-Man. So I could make this even smaller if I really wanted to. I could make this 0, 8. And what that would do then is that would give a much higher potential. Let me switch this one out too. For these middle values or the early values to really be Spider-Man. And then as we go through this a little bit more and more, we're going to have more Batman. Okay, let me show you one more trick, which is to sync audio as well. So I'll be back in just a second with that video set up. Okay, so now I've added 2 different audio tracks. You could also use the audio tracks inside of your video if you wanted to actually also flicker between the 2 audio tracks. Because my video doesn't have audio, I had to bring in 2 different tracks. So let's take a look at how we would actually sync up the opacity change with what you would see or hear as you're listening to the track. So the way to do that would be to open up one of our audio tracks here and go to audio levels, and once again we're going to option click on the stopwatch, and that's going to pull out this guy. Now what we want to do is we actually want to get the value from our video, right? We want to get the value from the Spider-Man video, sort of pull in what the opacity is from that, and then be able to use that as a way to trigger different audio values. So let me show you how to do that. So we're going to go over here, we're going to click on Spider-Man, we're going to hit T, we're going to open this one more time, and we're going to have our expression. So we can use the pick whip, which is this value here, and we can click on this, and then we can drag it to opacity. And what that does is that gives us exactly what the opacity value is for this layer. And if you remember, it's either 0 or 100. So here again, we can write a very simple ternary expression to check to see exactly what that value is. So let's say for this flute loop, we want to understand if Spider-Man is visible, meaning if it's 100% opacity, we actually use that sound, and then we'll turn the sound off if we don't. So for this, we're going to grab, let's just call this Spider-Man, and we're going to say if Spider-Man, actually let's write this as a ternary, so Spider-Man opacity is greater than 99.0, right, because that's going to be 100. Then we want to say our audio to be basically the value that it is. So audio levels are at 0 when it's just straight the audio, and then we're going to use a -24 value to make it silent. So we'll say if that's true, we want it to be at 0, and if we want it to be silent at that point, meaning it's less than 99, then we will say -24.0. One trick that I ran into is because we are using stereo sound, we actually need to pass in an array. So we actually need to use 2 different values. That way you get both left and right channel. So instead what we're going to do here is we're going to say, we're going to wrap these in square brackets, say 0, 0. And we're going to wrap this in square brackets and say -24, -24.0. Okay, so this should now give us just the audio track of the flute loop. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to actually get the other track, right? Because we don't really want both tracks simultaneously making sound. So actually what we want to do is we want to use the other track and invert the values. So we'll come back over here and we will click on, in the drum track, we will turn off audio values, and we'll paste all this in. And then what we want here is, let me give myself a little bit more room. We will say if this is less than 99, we'll actually just invert the values. Okay, so with this, I'm going to run this out and we'll take a look at it and make sure it makes sense. All right, and that worked. We were able to sync our audio directly to the transparency of a video layer in very little bits of code. It's pretty simple with expressions, and this is where I think expressions are really cool, especially in After Effects. Some people did ask me, like, oh, did you do this directly in Stable? And I can't imagine trying to do that directly in Stable Diffusion. It would drive me insane. And even trying to do it manually in After Effects you would be spending hours upon hours making that happen. So this is actually the first expressions tutorial I've ever done, so let me know if you want to see more of them. I hope you check out the video I did where I used all these pieces, which is called Editation on Violence, and maybe there's more demos in there that people want me to show off. Yeah, so thanks again for your time. Hope you found this helpful. Let me know if there's anything else I can help with, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.